my burning question, maybe if I could pose this to you now.
Please. I'm ready.
Is LSU now, by virtue of this defeat, eliminated from playoff contention?
No, absolutely not. Okay,
No?
so it's week one. It's not a great loss on the scoreboard. It's actually better than it really was because it was 45-17 before sort of garbage time touchdown. It doesn't eliminate them because it's week one. Because we saw Ohio State lose to Virginia Tech and go on to win a national title, right? There is precedent for a team looking pretty flat and getting stomped in week one and figuring things out. I think there's a good amount of talent on this LSU roster. There's still pretty open questions about where, the LSU secondary is. We saw a little bit of sloppiness from the DBs, the new corners getting sort of pushed around by, look, we've already spent how many minutes talking about this game? We haven't even uttered the two words, Keon
Coleman. Yeah, man.
That guy's a winter wonder. He just is a winter wonder, right? That's what we talk about, where you're like, I can see this receiver being a problem in January. And so it remains to be seen what kind of game Florida State might be playing in January. But you see the obvious game-changing type talent from Keon Coleman. And so that's going to give every single, secondary and corner a problem, it seems, that Florida State has ahead of it. But it doesn't eliminate LSU from contention because you're allowed to get better over the course of the season. You're allowed to course correct. You're allowed to self-diagnose and see what you have and what you don't. And are we using this guy correctly? Because I know there's a lot about Harold Perkins that LSU fans didn't like about how the defense was weaponizing him. There's a lot about the passing game that leaves a lot to be desired, a lot about the running game, a lot about the offensive game plan in general. LSU has time to figure it out. If they beat teams that will be ahead of it, if they flip things around and win, they will beat Georgia, they will beat Alabama, they will beat Tennessee, whoever is going to be put in their path, be it on their schedule or the SEC championship game. I don't think it eliminates them because you still have to gamble on talent. You still have to gamble on the fact that in year one they won the West and they're returning a ton. You have to give them the opportunity to say, we can improve and be better and, essentially go 12-1 because they're the type of team in terms of how they're constructed that hypothetically could.
If they had lost by 7, I would agree with you.
Hey, real quick, thanks for stopping by. Now would be a terrific time to subscribe to the Solid Verbal for college football videos all season long.
They lost by 21. It could have been more if not for that late 75-yard touchdown pass. They were down 28 points.
Yeah, but what you're saying is, hypothetically, if they run the table and go 12-1 and win the SEC, they're automatically. I don't understand, right? Does it eliminate them in terms of what we saw on the field? Do they not appear to be a 12-1 team? I think that's correct. I think that's the correct way of looking at it.
Look, it's week one. We can only answer this question by making some assumptions. Your assumption is that if LSU gets better and runs the table and wins the SEC, in that case, I would agree. Yeah, they're still in the playoff. But I think if we assume that LSU is going to encounter other roadblocks along the way, notably Alabama, maybe Georgia, who knows if things go well in
they
an
will
SEC
play Alabama
game.
LSU, yeah.
Right. So there are other opportunities for LSU to show what it's made of. But assuming that LSU is just sort of the team that we expected in the preseason, they don't snap into some almighty form and run the table, I think they're done. I think they're done. By virtue of this loss, they're done because you know what happens? And I saw our friend Ari Wasserman from The Athletic pointed this out as well. You know this well as an Oregon fan with how they lost in week one last season to the Georgia Bulldogs by 46 points. Every single week, you have to answer that question. You have to compensate for that question that people are going to have in the back of their minds, which is, yeah, but you lost by 21 to so-and-so. Yeah, but you lost by 46 by so-and-so. Provided that Florida State continues on this trajectory and they look so good in the second half, we'll see on that front.
Right.
But if they continue on that course and they end up being a top 4 team by the time all is said and done, LSU has no answer for the fact that they lost in this manner and looked as bad as they did in the second half against Florida State. There will be no way for them to overcome that. And so I think for that reason, I'm out on them as a playoff contender. They're allowed to get better, but there will never be an answer for that question. There will never be an answer for that question that they can deliver that I think will make the playoff committee, that will make those of us out here who talk about this for a living feel better about them as a playoff contender. I think they're done.
Okay, so a couple of things. They have the opportunity to get better, And so you can say when I watch Jayden Daniels and Brian Kelly come together to operate an offense that is supposed to be playoff caliber, I don't see it. So they have the opportunity. The other thing I would remind everybody listening is this might have been their worst day. And you're not as bad as you are on your worst day. You're not as good as you are on your best day. And that might have been Florida State's best day, right? You're never going to be as consistently excellent as you are on your best day. And you're never going to be as poor or porous as you are on your worst day. And so I'm not ready to write off LSU because it's a sample size of 1. And neither one of us were believers in LSU as a playoff team heading into the season. And I don't think that's changed right now. But I'm also not ready to use Sharpie as what's Seth Davis. That's what he does. Sharpie. They're out in the tournament. I'm not ready to do that quite yet, just because it's a long season. It's a chaotic sport and a lot can happen. I didn't think going in LSU had a playoff quarterback. I think Jayden Daniels is a good quarterback. And so if I'm going to say playoff teams are quarterback and defense, that remains unchanged to me. So no, I don't believe LSU is a playoff team, but I don't think they're eliminated from the possibility of being a playoff team.
I think they're done. I think there's no way to overcome this. And to your point, even if Florida State ends up playing down the rest of the way, if this is the best half of football they play all year, that almost makes the case for LSU worse moving forward. It makes the case worse. I don't see how they can overcome this. And it's not a bad loss to lose to what I think presume at this point is a top 5 team, but to lose in the manner that they did, that speaks volumes. I don't know how you get past that.
You have to go all the way back to last year to find a team that lost by 3 touchdowns and still made the playoff tie, right? Ohio State loses by 22 points to Michigan, a playoff caliber team, if we think Florida State is a playoff caliber team. And that happened right before the playoff, right? That was right before. So that's the only thing is...
But who else were you going to put above Michigan and Ohio State in that case? Not Michigan.
Understand.
Who else were you going to put above Ohio State in that case?
But you'd rather lose week 1, right? If you're going to make the playoff case later on, lose in late August, early September. That's all.
Argue with us on social media. Let us know what you think.
Okay, so you think Florida State, though? Let's flip it to the more positive element of things, because you and Brian Kelly have baggage, and your couples therapy time still hasn't been exhausted. Florida State was not a playoff team in the first half, and was absolutely a playoff team in the second half. It's week 1. You're not as consistently great as you are at your best. You're not as consistently ugly at your ugliest. But now that we have the benefit of seeing in this moment every team other than Clemson and Duke, I think, right? That's the only game today?
Yeah.
Does Florida State, with almost no sample size, did you like them going into season? You love them going into the season, right?
Yeah.
Was that changed because of the second half? Was that changed because, now we have like the Keon Coleman data point? Was that changed because of anything, just because it's LSU? What was altered, if any, or is this just Florida State playing to your expectations as a playoff caliber team?
I thought in the second half they looked better than I expected all preseason. That was the best half of football from any one singular entity that I saw. And no disrespect to Colorado, that game was fun, but Florida State's better. And their ability...
What a take from you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
No, I know what you're saying. I'm agreeing with you, yeah.
Their ability to stretch the field with big wide receivers. The big wide receiver thing should not be overlooked. Now they've got Keon Coleman, who had 3 touchdowns in his debut. Looked incredible. And obviously Johnny Wilson, who's been there. He's a big dude as well. That gives them a dynamic, I think, that they had been lacking a little bit. Sure. They just needed more they still need more consistency out there. They still had drops that they have to contend with and shore up, I think. But I thought, and this is coming from somebody who's been very high on Florida State and has them in his playoff predictions. Mm-hmm. They look better than I thought. They really did. I'd vote him number 1.
I thought
right now I'd vote him number 1. Why not?
That's fine.